All right. Shalom, everybody. Shalom. Peace. Today I'm going to do a presentation, or I'm going to provide evidence that there's importance in Black people in the scriptures and in the Bible. I'm going to present arguments to show and prove the Israelites and the three sons of Ham are Black people. So the title of this presentation is "The Deeper You Dig, the Darker History Gets." My introduction. A general misconception I hear from Black unbelievers or Pan-Africanists is that the Bible is a white man book. This would be a problem because a lot of Black people around the world worship Yahuwah. And some of them would commonly say it doesn't matter what Jesus or the Israelites look like. I would say that they're right when it comes to salvation, but historically and truthfully, it is important. In this presentation, I intend to show the truth of what the Hebrews truly look like and the importance of Black people in the Bible. I do not intend to cause separation between anybody here today. We are all Yah's children, as it says in Romans 9 and 10, and we are all one people and race, but we must settle these issues truthfully. Any questions will be asked at the end of the presentation or in a separate hangout. Here are the general misconceptions I hear from Pan-Africanists or people that are against the idea that the Israelites were of color. Why would you worship a white man given to you from slavery? Or the ancient Jews look like the common Israeli or modern Jew today. Or what about this one? The Bible was made by Greeks or white people to destroy Africans. Aren't Black people cursed from the curse of Ham? Well, we're going to address each of these issues very strictly today. So my first section is going to be biblical evidence for colored people in the scriptures. And for this, we're going to go all the way to the beginning in Genesis 2, where we see man being created. And it clearly states in Genesis 2, verse 7, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." The Hebrew word for man is ahadam. The Hebrew word dam means blood/red. Also, the Hebrew word for ground is ha'adama, which means reddish brown, or the ground. If you look in Ellen G. White's writings, for those of us viewers who are Seventh Adventists, she also hints color or physical description of Adam and Eve, as it states in Patriarchs and Prophets. As man came forth from the hand of his creator, he was of lofty stature and perfect symmetry. His countenance bore the ruddy tint of health and glowed with the light of joy, life and joy. Adam's height was much greater than that of men who now inhabit the earth. Eve was somewhat less in stature, yet her form was noble of beauty. So here's an example or an image of what Adam and Eve would have looked like, or would have been a better representation than we are clearly being seen today. These images taken from the Bible Project. I would recommend everyone to watch the Bible Project if they want to have a better understanding of the scriptures, or if they want to see beautiful illustrations and animations. There's plenty of pictures today that I've taken from that channel. So I urge you to go and check out the Bible Project. So this is also an image of the Ha'adama, which is the reddish brown ground. And as you can see, this clearly isn't of a white complexion or of a so-called fair complexion. This is definitely colored complexion. And here's also another example we see in creatures. So here are two young men from East Africa who clearly have a reddish tint. And here's also a cow from the Americas who has a reddish tint. So the term "reddy," whenever you see this in the Bible, does not necessarily mean they were of a fair-skinned complexion, or they were like white people we see today, because reddy can also mean reddish brown. So it's all contextual, and I think it's fair for us to assume, especially at that time, as we know, there wasn't really any white people around at that time. So the only safe assumption is to say that yes, they were colored. Next, I'm going to show you a video of two archaeologists and historians that actually went on National Geographic, and they actually showed a reconstruction, or based on all the DNA that they could find today, the dominant traits and the recessive traits, and they mapped out what the Adam of the scriptures would have looked like based on the dominant genes present today in man. And this is what they found. As you can see here, this is the image of Adam that they found, that they reconstructed. So as you can see here, he clearly looks like a so-called African or Negro today. And this is the father, or the first man. The father of all man, or the first man, people like to say. So that just tells you a lot of what, the people of the scriptures possibly look like. And considering this isn't no biased Black nationalist website or video, this is National Geographic. And the group of men that did this were, as you can see, clearly white people. So Black people are making this video. No, there's no bias to this. They are using pure science and pure facts. And this is what they came up with. So, but yeah, anyway, to move on. So who else was Black in the Bible? Well, we have Moses' wife, Zipporah, was Black since she was a Cushite. Yeah, this is another person that a lot of people will openly recognize as Black, only because the scripture mentions her as a Midianite or Cushite. Because as we know, the sons of Ham were predominantly Black, and very widely known that the sons of Ham were Black, and Cush happens to be a son of Ham. Therefore, his descendants, the Cushites, would also be Black too. The Shulamite woman mentioned in the Songs of Solomon is also mentioned as Black. She says, I am Black but comely. The Queen of Sheba, who visited Solomon, as we know, is also Black. Simon of Cyrene, who was one of the apostles, was Black. And the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8, verse 37, which Philip helped interpret the Torah for, was also Black. So, Noah and his 3 sons. In Genesis 9, verse 18, it states that Noah had 3 sons that came forth out of the ark, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. Genesis 10, which is the table of nations, describes the descendants of each of these 3 sons. As the sons of Ham gave birth to the Cushites, the Egyptians, Put, and the Canaanites. So as you can see these images, these are 3 images, just an example of what the sons would have looked like. All 3 sons would have been Black people. They would have been colored, and they would have had these features. Or, like there's different characteristics, there's different categories. Like they'll say there's a Negroid and a Hamite and a Mongoloid. But if you look at even those categories, the earliest example of these categories, you clearly see they are colored. So this obviously, Genesis 10 is a very good indicator or highlighter to look at how men dispersed around the planet and the nations and the lineages. So I'd recommend you read Genesis 10 for more information on the lineage of the Shemites, Hamites, and Japhethites. So yeah, here's an image of the locations that they inhabited. It's commonly believed that the Shemites inhabited the Mesopotamian region, along with the Hamites also, but predominantly Hamites had most of Northeast Africa, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan and those areas. When it comes to Japheth had a lot of Asia and a lot of Europe. If you look at the sons of Japheth, you can actually see that many of the founders of the Greek nations and the Hindus actually reference one of the descendants of Japheth, so we can indicate that Japheth gave birth to the Asians and the Europeans. So Ham, let's dig deep into each brother and see what exactly they are, more information about them. So the word Ham or Ham means burnt or salty or black. He's the son of Noah, like I've mentioned before. And if you read the story of Genesis, where Ham and the brothers come out of the boat, there's a vile incident that happens with him and his father, which is actually quite important in the whole context of the scriptures when you look at the land mass of Canaan. I would recommend you look more into that in Genesis 5, 7, and 9, and 10, and you'll understand the confusion and the dispersion and all of the things we see today with land masses and peoples. Yes, he gave birth to the Canaanites, Ethiopians, Egyptians, and North Africans in general. And many people don't know this, but there's many Southern Arabians who, like, for example, the Yemenis, who actually have ties and links to Hamites or Ethiopians. So that's just a short indicator or piece of information about Ham. Shem. Shem is the son of Noah, as mentioned in Genesis 5 and 6. The word Shem in Hebrew simply means name, and he was also the eldest son. And some people think this because he was the forefather of the Hebrews. I'm not sure if the names were in elderly order, but it's plausible. I'm not going to dispute if it is or isn't. Other than that, we know that the line of Shem is the line of the Messiah will come through from the tribe of Judah, which is from Abraham, which is a Hebrew. So we know, and the Hebrews, which also come from Eber, and Eber, which comes from Shem. So we know that this is the line that we're dealing with when we deal with the Israelites. We're going to deal with the Shemites, and we're going to see more about them later on to verify what they would have looked like. And also another interesting fact is many of the Shemitic languages, including Hebrew, Chali, Syriac, Arabic, Ethiopic, and Amharic as well, which is supposed to be an Ethiopian language, but it's also classed as a Semitic language. So it clearly shows that the cultural exchange and us moving around in African places and in predominantly colored areas. So there's definitely a heavy indicator of mixing around all these different peoples. So the Hebrews now. The term Hebrew actually came from one of the descendants of Shem, which is Eber, and it simply means to cross over or from the other side. And this Eber is the great grandson of great grandfather, of Abraham, and he basically, his line came through, gave birth to like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all of the Israelites and the Hebrews in general. It's not just the Israelites, also gave also birth to the Ishmaelites and the Midianites and many other groups of people within the so-called Middle East. So that's just some information on the term Hebrew. The God of the Israelites, or the deity of the Israelites, is Yahuwah Elohim. The vocalization of the Tetragrammaton Yahuwah Elohim is actually derives from the sacred name movement. I'm not too familiar with the sacred name movement, but what I'm sure about it is that they use a different pronunciation for the God of the Bible. Rather than saying Yahweh or Jehovah, they'll say Yahuwah. And this is also the same for Jesus. They wouldn't say Yeshua or Yeshua, they would say Yahushai, the Hamashiach, which simply means Yah is salvation, or the anointed one. So now Japheth. Just a quick mention of him. Japheth means enlargement, particularly described as having fair skin later on through his descendants. He is the progenitor of the Greeks, many scholars are saying, because of one of the descendants. And he has 7 sons. He's predominantly prosperous around Asia and Europe. And if you look at many of the Greek and Roman history and the deities, you see there's a very strong connection to this descendant Japheth. So now we're going to move on into the next segment, which is Hebrews mistaken for Hamites. There's many times in the scriptures where the Israelites are actually mistaken for Hamites. So let's look at some examples. So, for example, Joseph, and this is from Genesis 42 and 3 and 8. And it says, and Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not. So now you have here Joseph, who is a brother of 12 sons, who grew up with him. And they were all Hebrews, all Israelites. And as soon as, Joseph goes into Egypt, probably wore different clothes, looked a bit older, same brother, maybe had a bit of makeup or whatever the Egyptians like to put on. But they couldn't even recognize him. They looked at him and saw him as an Egyptian, but this was their brother. So clearly, an Egyptian and an Israelite have similarities in terms of their physical characteristics or their appearance. It's not very clear for the Israelites to identify their own brother who they grew up with, just because he was wearing Egyptian clothes. So to me, that tells me that Egyptian and the Israelite are indistinguishable, especially at least at that time, I would say, personally. I mean, this is again seen in Moses' example, and this is not long after Joseph. And let me read this passage. This is Exodus 2, verse 19, and it says, now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, how is it that ye are come to so soon today? And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds. So that's Exodus 2, verse 19. They're actually calling Moses an Egyptian, even though he is an Israelite from the tribe of Levi. These are Midianite women calling Moses an Egyptian. And again, the same argument could be used for Joseph's example. He probably was just wearing Egyptian clothing. But because they were so indistinguishable, they couldn't even see that he was an actual Israelite. They just saw him and he looked like an Egyptian. Yeah, very interesting. Here's another example in Genesis 50. This is actually where Joseph passes, and he requested his brothers to bury him in the land of Canaan, in his homeland. So it came to time now where he passed, and they're taking his body to Canaan to be buried. Now let's pay attention to what the Canaanites say about these group of people coming down now into Canaan to bury Joseph. So it says in Genesis 15, when we read verse 8 to 11, and all the house of Joseph and his brethren and his father's house, only their little ones and their flocks and their herds, they left in the land of Goshen, and there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan, and there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, this is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians, wherefore the name of which is called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. So these Canaanites in verse 11 are looking at these Israelites grieving and mourning for the passing of their brethren, and the Canaanites are calling them Egyptians. So now I've already shown 3 examples within the same timeline, or around the same time, because between Moses and Joseph, it's a few, maybe like 100 or something years. So it's not a massive time away. Around we can at least agree, based on the scriptures, around this time, from time of Joseph, time of Moses, Egyptians and Israelites look the same. Based on these passages, other nations are confusing Israelites with Egyptians. The Israelites themselves can't recognize their own when the Israelites are wearing Egyptian clothing. To me, they just look like this. Sounds like they're all the same. That's just me. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay. Here's another example, and this one's even more factual, right? Paul. This was first century. Like, this is thousands of years after Moses, and Paul is now being mistaken for an Egyptian. Let's read Acts 21, verse 37 to 39. And Paul was to be led into the castle. He said unto the chief captain, May I speak unto thee? Who said, Canst thou speak Greek? Art thou Paul, that Egyptian, which before these days madest an uproar? But Paul said, I am a man, which I am a Jew. So here, the Greeks are looking at Paul and telling and asking him, like, okay, you can speak Greek. Oh, okay. Are you an Egyptian? That Egyptian, that did, before these days made us an uproar, talking about some famous Egyptian. All right. And Paul says to them, no, I'm a man. I'm just a Jew. So even second century, first century, right? After all the Romans and Greeks come in, because they would like to say, oh, yeah, the Romans and Greeks came in and made everything white. And yeah. But Paul is clearly looking like an Egyptian, even the first and second century. So we've got people, after all these invasions, Persians, Babylon, they still look like Egyptians. An invasion doesn't exterminate a native population. It may decrease it, or it may have admixtures, but it won't eradicate a native population. This is what they look like. You know what I'm saying? And the same argument could be made today. What do these Israelites look like today? We'll see. We'll see as we go along in this presentation. So now here's another mention of for those that like to say, no, well, the Egyptians weren't black, they were olive skinned. So yeah, if they look like the Egyptians, they were both olive skinned. Well, I hate to break it to you, but one of the most famous historians, a white boy named Herodotus, let's just see what he says, right? For the fact is, as I soon came to realize myself, and then heard from others later, that the Colossians are obviously Egyptian. When the notion occurred to me, I asked both the Colossians and the Egyptians about it, and found that the Colossians had better recall of the Egyptians than the Egyptians did of them. Some Egyptians said that that thought the Colossians originated with Sesostris' army, but I myself guessed their Egyptian origin did not only because the Colossians are dark-skinned and curly-haired, which does not count for much by itself, because these features are common in others too, but more importantly, because Colossians, Egyptians, and Ethiopians are all the peoples of the world who practice circumcision. Ooh, ouch. Jeez. And who always have done so. So he's now looking at these groups of people. So let me break it down, right? He's looking at these Colossians, and in his head is saying, yeah, the Egyptian. Okay. But the Colossians have dark skin and curly hair. And you see how we just casually just acknowledged that and moved on like it was normal, to the point that he even said this isn't evidence on its own because there's bare people with dark skin and woolly hair, or like the Egyptians, or like the Ethiopians, like the Colossians. So there's a common understanding even in Herodotus' time that people of the Mediterranean / Northeast African region have dark skin and curly hair. He didn't have to, specify only a small little tribe in sub-Saharan Africa or this and that. He made a general Egyptians, like that's a general statement. Colossians, Ethiopians, and even to narrow it down for them to say, oh, what about the Israelites? It says, are the only peoples in the world who practice circumcision and who have always done so. It's gonna get more tricky for those who deny this when we start looking into the Jews and how they practice circumcision. And when I also show you now from Tacitus how they are being referenced as descendants of the Ethiopian just based on their physical characteristics. Let's see what the Roman Tacitus says about the Israelites. Yeah. So this is the History Book 5, and it basically talks about him speculating the origins of the Israelites, because you've got the Romans coming in now, looking at these tribes, got historians and scribes writing down information about them, analyzing them. And this chapter, in chapter 2 from History Book 5, he describes the origin or the possible origins of where the Israelites might have come from based on people speaking around and, him questioning and walking around and basically trying to understand these people. And this is the speculations that he came up with. However, as I am about to describe the last days of a famous city, it seems proper for me to give some account of its origin. It is said that the Jews were originally exiles from the island of Crete, who settled in the furthest parts of Libya at the time when Saturn had been disposed and expelled by Jove. An argument in favor of this is derived from the name. There is a famous mountain in Crete called Ida, and hence the inhabitants were called Idai, which was later lengthened into the barbarous form Idea. Some hold that in the region of Isis, the superfluous population of Egypt, under the leadership of Hierosolomunus and Iuda, discharged itself on the neighboring lands. Many others think that they were an Egyptian stock. So this is the second speculation. The first speculation is that they're from the island Crete. If you look at the island Crete, they're black people. Second speculation now, that they come from an Egyptian stock. Okay, and it says here, okay, they're from Egyptian stock, which in the reign of Caiaphas or Cephas was forced to migrate by fear and hatred. Still others report that they were Assyrian refugees and landless people who first got control of part of Egypt, then later had their own cities and lived in the Hebrew territory and the nearest parts of Syria. Still, others say that the Jews are illustrious origin, being Ptolemy, a people celebrated in Homer's poems, who founded a city and gave it the name Hierosoloma, formed from their own. And if you read on in that chapter, you also see them being described as having Ethiopian origins. So you've really got four speculations. First speculation is them coming from the island of Crete, which, as we look, is clearly black people at that time. Second speculation is them being a stock of Egyptians. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the speculation based on the previous passages in the Bible about them looking like Egyptians. Third speculation is that they're the Assyrian refugees who went into Egypt and took control. To me, it sounds kind of similar to the Hyksos coming into Egypt, trying to take control. When I say Hyksos, I mean like a Shemitic group of people coming into Egypt and becoming a population or gaining growth in there. To me, that sounds similar, right? And the fact that all of these nations that are being speculated are of color, to me, only makes sense that what he is looking at is a group of colored people. You can't come to a speculation that the Israelites came from white people or light-skinned people if the people that he's speculating are dark-skinned people. So the only strongest conclusion I can make is that based on these four speculations by a white Roman named Tacitus, the Israelites came from black people, or they themselves were black people. Anyway, let's continue. One thing I'm going to address very quickly is the curse of Ham. It's been debunked many times. I don't know why a lot of Pan-Africanists and people like to bring this up as if this is biblical in any way. The curse is, people like to say the curse of Ham, but it's more or less the curse of Canaan, really, because Noah didn't curse Ham; he cursed his seed. He cursed Canaan, and the curse on Canaan was that his brother and Japheth and Shem would take over Canaan, or Canaan would be under them, and they will serve the Shemites and Japhethites. That is a curse on Canaan. Really, it's not really a curse on Ham. So this is one thing that they tried to make up it during the slave trade times to demean black people and make us feel like we have no importance in the scriptures. If they could tell us that we're cursed and that we're from the curse of Ham, we'll be more submissive and have less self-importance and dignity. So I think this is a very deceitful and very divisive technique and method, but this is 100% false, and please no one buy into this garbage about black people being cursed and turned black-skinned, because none of that is in the scriptures. Okay, so one thing I'm going to address now, I'm going to address these labels, Negro and Bantu. The term Negro simply just means black, right, or dark-skinned, right, and it originates from the Latin, originates from Spanish and Portuguese. They call it a negro or negra. There's many other terms like Marano or Moran, and these are simply just terms to say black or dark-skinned, really. But these terms were also adapted and used as racial slurs, and to call a slave, you call them a negro, and so it has a very big evolution. There's also the N-word, nigger. So it has an evolution of usages. But the term Bantu now is actually a group of people. It's actually a language group, and some also could say that it's a group of people, one tribe. The name Bantu simply means the people, and it's estimated that there's about 300 or 600 ethnic groups in Africa who speak Bantu languages. They inhabit a geographical area stretching east and southward from Central Africa, across the African Great Lakes region, and down into Southern Africa. So, based on the scholarship and the biologists, they say that Bantus migrated or expanded from West Africa and then expanded into the rest of Africa, Central, South, and parts of East. So this is what they say the Bantu people came from. So here's an example of a typical Negroid or Bantu. This is what they say. The big lips, the big nose, the curly hair, the dark skin. So this is a typical example of what Bantu would have looked like, at least a Congolese, Mongol Bantu. So according to scriptures, who are the Negroes? Well, if you look at the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, it states in the definitions section, the Ham is the younger son of Noah, which we've said before. Okay, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of the 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. Interesting. So the Negroes are being excluded from the descendants of Ham. So if the Negroes aren't descendants of Ham, then who are they? Well, let's see. Here are 3 examples of different types of Bantus or Negroes. These are, don't drill me for these images. These are just general images. They could look much more different from this, but these are just general images. So first image, we have a West African and a West African women, and then South African man and a South African woman, and a Central African man and Central African woman. As you can clearly see, there's very minor differences in the physique or in the facial features, and this is because they all are from a singular tribe or from a singular lineage, which is the Bantu peoples or Bantu tribe, and they all speak Bantu languages, as a matter of fact. These regions predominantly sub-Saharan Africa, so West, Central, and South. They all share a haplogroup known as E1B1A. E1B1A is indigenous to, they say, the Horn of Africa. But the problem with that is, in the Horn of Africa, the haplogroup is E1B1B. So how can E1B1B or the Ethiopian region be the place of origin when it has a different haplogroup to its descendants? Makes no sense to me, but that's what they say. I would rather say that this E1B1A, E1B1A1, because it's so specific to the sub-Saharan African region, I would speculate that it came from another area. I would say, based on the historical migrations and proof that will further show that this specific haplogroup comes from the Levant region, which we now call today Palestine or the Middle East. So here's the question: where do Negroes or the Bantu people actually come from? Well, here's an example of the slave trade map. A lot of people would like to say, well, show me the Jews and the Israelite stuff in Africa. You don't see none of that in Africa. Well, in West Africa, in the 19th century, you see a slave coast being named Judah or Oda. And I mean, I don't think I need to explain where that comes from. I mean, the name Oda alone is obviously Hebraic, and it's from one of the sons of Jacob. So, I mean, what more do you want? I mean, no, let's keep going. Let's keep going. All right. Here's an image of Oda or Judah. And this is an image of actually in the town where they would gather the slaves. You can see on the right side, the smoke. This is because it's actually a pillage as well. The colonizers have come in now. They're rounding up slaves. It's almost like an auction. As you can see, people are sitting around watching, looking at the people being chained and rounded up. So this is a very horrifying sight to see. But this just shows that amongst the nation of Oda, or the area of Oda, they're all dark-skinned people and colored people and all Negroid. And this location is called Judah. I wonder why. Let's continue. Here's an image of a Udian or Wadian or Judean warrior. Judean. uh, as you can see here, he's got a spear, he's got a sword, he's got a shield, he's got bow and arrows. And you can also see on his ankle, on his shin, on his left leg, you can see hinges. Interesting. And here's an image of a slave woman from Orda. And you can also see on her clothing, she's also got hinges on her robe, on her garments. So this is an image of the migrations. These are all the different routes that were taken from Israel. There's a route going stretching through straight into Egypt, into Morocco, and then down into West Africa. And there's also a route stretching from Yemen down into South Africa and east. So there's many routes that were taken. It wasn't one migration route. To learn further more about the migrations and the traveling and journeying of the Israelites, I'd recommend the book From Babylon to Timbuktu from Rudolf R. Windsor. He extensively in detail goes through the migration and the journeys of the Israelites into Africa from 70 AD. Just a brief history on that. What happened is the Jews did another revolt because there's three revolts. This is the third Jewish revolt. And the Romans had enough of this. So they got to the point now where they were exterminating and killing, and even they were abolishing Jews, they were abolishing Jewish practices. They were going into the temples, burning the temples. They were sacrificing pigs in the temples, and they were also kicking out Jews from Israel. They actually there's actually letters found to say if any Jew be found in Palestine, they should be killed. So Jews are clearly being expelled from Israel. So that already debunks the idea that there's Jews in Israel today, because Jews are being expelled in 70 AD by Romans. And I wonder where they went. Well, as you can see, they went into Egypt and they went into Ethiopia. And he mentions a Jewish philosopher, Philo. He lived in Alexandria, and he mentions a lot about them coming into Egypt and Ethiopia. So I really recommend reading From Babylon to Timbuktu for more information on the migrations. Let's go deeper into the kingdoms of West Africa, because a lot of people have not really heard or learned much about this. It's a very, very important thing to know as a Bantu person, to know where we come from, our origins, and also to understand the majesty and how great these kingdoms were. So, is there any evidence that West Africa was Jewish based on any historical writings? Well, if you look at Leo Africanus, he mentions this. He says in the Garua, there were some very rich Jews. The intervention of the preacher Muhammad al-Majai of Telmesen set up the pillage of their goods, and most of them had been killed by population. This event took place during the same year when the Jews had been expelled from Spain and Sicily by the Catholic king. Leo Africanus further wrote, "The king Hezekiah is a declared enemy of the Jews. He will not allow any to live in the city. If he hears it said that a Berber merchant frequents them or does business with them, he confiscates his goods." So also, if you look at the Spanish expulsion of the Jews in Spain and Portugal, what happened was as Islamic nations were growing, they began to maintain control of Portugal and Spain, and also they controlled a lot of West Africa. Because the Jews, or Judaism as we know, came before Islam, the Jews actually were more present in West Africa and in other regions of Africa before Islam. But when Islam came in, it started to misplace a lot of the Jews, to the point where the king Hezekiah actually declared and wrote a deal with the Queen of Spain to expel Jews in their kingdoms. This is why there's a whole letter declaring that the Moors and the Jews must leave Spain and must leave Portugal because they're money hungry and they're economically dominating us. And there's all these different excuses that they make. So yeah, this is clearly an example of Jews or Jewish people at least being in West Africa and being all over the world and being described as Moorish or black. So I mean, this is 16th, 17th century stuff. This isn't something random or from a black nationality or native website or whatever. This is verifiable information that you can find all over the internet, all over historical books and writings. So no one is making these things up. Okay, here's another one. For example, it talks about the majesty and how great it was. For example, it says here, the historical presence of Jewish communities in Africa is well attested. Today, the descendants of these Jews live in nations such as Sierra Leone, Liberia, Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria, and many other areas. According to the 7th century, Tariq al-Fatash and the Tariq al-Sudan, several Jewish communities existed as part of the Ghana, Mali, and Songhai empires. One such community was formed by a group of Egyptian Jews who allegedly traveled by way of the Sahel corridor through Chad into Mali. Manuscript C of the Tariq al-Fatash described a community called the Bani Israel. In 1402, it lived in Tindrama and possessed 333 wells and had 7 princes as well as an army. So this is clearly talking about the land masses that the Jews inhabited, and it's talking about the wells and how great the armies were. So now this is the best part where I like to show images and actual depictions. Now, people like to say, well, we have no images of the Israelites. Well, the reason why you have no images of the Israelites for themselves, from themselves, I'd say, is because it's commanded in the scriptures not to make any graven images of the heavens above or anything from the earth beneath or any likeness of anything, man or any other thing. So you won't really see statues of Israelites made by Israelites because it's not part of our customs to do so. But we actually have images of Israelites by enemies or by other nations when they've captured the Israelites or writing about the Israelites. And let's have a look at how they depicted the Israelites. So this is an image of a Mesopotamian priest dating to 2000 BC. As you can see, he has dark skin and he has curly hair. And as you can see here, his clothes or his attire seems very Mesopotamian or seems very Northeast African. To me, this does not look like a European or Caucasoid. To me, it looks like a Negroid. If you look at his nose, you can see from the side it's quite big, and his lips are quite big also. These are clear characteristics that fit the Negroid type. Here's an image from the tomb of Beni Hassan. I'm not going to play the video at the moment, but I'd recommend you check out the tomb of Beni Hassan. It actually shows you evidence that the Israelites were in Canaan, were in Egypt. Because a lot of people will say, oh, there's no evidence that Joseph and his brothers went to Egypt or Moses and them were in Egypt. Well, according to the archaeologists and the historians today, they found this image, and under this image was described and the Shasu of Yahoo, or the travelers who believe in Yahoo. And if you look at the name Yahoo or Yahuwah, it's mentioned all over Kemet. I mean, it further became a moon god for Egyptians. Maybe they plagiarized that from us. I'm not sure why there's a moon god named Yahuwah or Yahoo in Egyptian mythology, but you can clearly see there's some cultural exchange, and we're even being mentioned in the wars of Kemet. Here's the actual image of the it was close or zoomed in. Because this is another thing that they did, or archaeologists like to do. When they see an image of, a dark-skinned person on the hieroglyphs or on the walls, they would like to lighten the skin, or they would like to edit features. I mean, look at the Sphinx, for example. If you go to any statue of a pharaoh or an Egyptian, you'll see the nose has been knocked off. And if you look at many of the answers online, they'll tell you, oh, it's climate, oh, it's a corrosion, oh, it's a natural occurrence. That's the garbage, okay? A natural occurrence, if it was a corrosion or natural occurrence, why target the nose? It should target every part of the statue. But most predominantly, the main feature, I've seen a whole statue, for example, the arms, the feet, everything is there. The nose is gone. To me, that looks like it was planned, or someone strategically tried to remove a nose. I don't know if you think I'm making this up, but you can look up, try and find the image of a pharaoh with a nose that hasn't been reconstructed or hasn't been used. The artist's, interpretation of what it would be, because you won't find it. I went to the British Museum and looked into the Egyptian section. Every image or a statue of an Egyptian didn't have a nose. So you tell me what that's all about. Anyway, here's an image of the Persian royal guards. These are the Elamite archers. They're mentioned twice in the scriptures. They're mentioned more times, but these are the ones I found. The Bible commends the archery skills. Actually, history commends that they were one of the best archers around in that time. For example, in Jeremiah 49, verse 35, it says, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might." Isaiah 22, verse 7 says, "And Elam bare the quiver with chariots of horsemen, of men and horsemen, and curtain covered the shield." So yes, as we can see, the Persian guards, the Elamite archers, known to be very skilled with the arching. Here's another famous image, the Siege of Lachish. I actually had the opportunity to go to the siege, so to go to the British Museum, and I saw the image for myself. It's in aisle 10, I believe, and I actually managed to get within a few centimeters and actually look deep into the image, analyze it. I even tried to ask questions, looked at the captions, and I could clearly see, for me anyway, a group of black people being carried away by a group of black people. Because the context of this image is when the Assyrians now came into siege parts of Judah because King Hezekiah didn't want to pay the tax or the gold, to the point that even him and Kemet and Ethiopia, they managed to and Nubia, they tried to make an alliance to fight off the Assyrians, but they couldn't fight off the Assyrians, and the Assyrians ended up conquering all of the regions of Nubia, Egypt, and Israel. This is why if you look at the Hezekiah seal, you'll see an ankh, and you see many Egyptian symbology on there. This could be because obviously they had an alliance and they were working together in opposition to the king of Assyria. Here's a close-up image of the Siege of Lachish image. As you can see here, there's 6 Jews being carried away, or Judeans being carried away by the Syrians. The Syrians being on the left with the armor, and them making the Israelites captives. If you actually see the image for yourself, the full image of it, there's very gruesome scenes. You'll see the Israelites being skinned. You'll see them being beheaded. You'll see them being shot by arrows. You'll see them being, thrown off cliffs and buildings. It's a very harsh scene to see. But when you look at these Israelites, look at their hair, for example. You can see the dots on the hair and on the beard. These are clearly curly, typed, woolly type hair. And the only type of people you see with this kind of hair are Negroids. If you look at the bone structure, the neck, the physique, these are Negroes. And you can see they're quite distinct from the Assyrians. The Assyrians seem to be more of a slimmer figure. Even the Assyrians themselves do show some Negroid features, but you can predominantly see it within the Israelites, or at least the Judeans. Here's another image from the Assyrians. The Assyrians are known for their boasting about conquesting, and they showed many images. There's even images of the Egyptians and Nubians, which also look Negroid. So very interesting. Try and check out the Assyrian reliefs to look at these images of these ancient peoples. Very detailed images. But yeah, here are some images of some Sumerians being captured by some Assyrians. And even the Sumerians themselves, which I would consider the Israelites' cousins because they're both from Shem, they look Negroid. You can see them having short locks. You can see the cheek, the head size, everything is very similar to this previous image here we've seen before. Here's just a close-up of them. And you can see also they're wearing a headband as well. So the fashion is quite unique, and it's very interesting. Here's a head of a Hebrew. I said head of a Shemite, but if you actually go to the museum, it will say head of a Hebrew. This is a terracotta head. It's the style. As you can see within this head or this image, you can see that under hair, if you look closely, the hair is clearly curly hair, clearly Negroid hair. The nose and the lips, the cheeks, all of these features are clearly Negroid features. Here's another image from the Assyrian reliefs of Israelite corpse. This is being eaten up by crows. I don't know if this is to humiliate us or to make us, or to make them look weak, but they did many images defaming or making the Israelites look very weak. I mean, so here, even here, you can see the hair is curly. You can see the Negro features there. Here's an image of an Assyrian now. This is King Esarhaddon, right? And he reigned 601 to 669 BC. I mean, even the Syrian king looks Negroid. Look at his nose, look at his lips, look at his hand, look at these features. Even the Syrian king looks Negroid. And this is, to me, is of no surprise. Because even the Syrians are from Shem. And it's not bizarre that we're starting to see a trend. A lot of these Shemites look like Negroids. So when we looked at the Zendoveran dictionary, and it said, the Hamites are the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, the Puts, and the Libyans, but not the Negroes. Maybe because the Shemites are the Negroes. I mean, every Shemite I've presented, the Persian, the Mesopotamian priest, the king, the Syrian king, the Judeans, they look Negroid. I don't know. Maybe I'm making things up. Let's continue. Let's see. Here's an image of some Syrians playing music. There's many sources online that say they're Israelites, but I can't verify that. Some say they're Israelites, some say they're Syrians. Regardless whether these people are Syrians or Israelites, they also look Negroid. I would assume they're Syrians because if you look in this image in whole, they're playing music while the Israelites are being captured away. So maybe they're Syrian musicians, playing, victory music or whatever it may be. Or maybe the Israelites, because it speaks about the people from Zion playing music of sorrow and, music of, captivity. So these could be Israelites, but I would say most likely they're Syrians. But even within this image, like I've said, clearly look like Negroids. Here's another image found in Egypt. More evidence for all of those wackadoodles that like to say there's no evidence for Israelites in Egypt. How about this one, mate? Yeah, Shemitic slave. Yeah, in the museum of Hafia in Het. Yeah, a Shemitic slave. Look at the hair. Look at the beard. What you see, guys? The nose is off again. This is what I'm talking about. They take off the nose because they already know once you see that nose, you're gonna know what's really going on. Yeah, they took off the nose, but you don't need to look at the nose. We can look at the skin. They didn't manage to lighten the skin quick enough. Yeah, it probably looks light now if you go there now. I won't be surprised. But if you look in this image, I mean, it says it all, fam. Anyway. Here's an image of Abraham, yeah? And this is actually from the Roman and Greek period, right? This is 320 AD. So, I mean, even in this time, he's being depicted with having dark skin. And his son is being depicted as having dark skin because this is the scene or the story where Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac, but then obviously Yehovah sent, I think it was a ram or a goat, and they sacrificed the ram or goat instead. And symbolically, that references obviously the father sacrificing the son, and that's a deep thing that maybe I'll go into in the future. But yeah, this is just as you can see, an image of a black progenitor of the Jews in 320 AD. Very interesting. Here's an image of Moses parting the Red Sea in 303 BC to 225 AD. So this is the time that the speculating where this image was made. And within this image, you can clearly see the skin is very, very exaggerated. For Greek art, to see skin so exaggeratedly brown like this, it's like they were trying to. It probably was even darker than this. To be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if things were, edited. I mean, even the God's hands up here are black as well. I'm not going to hit anything with that, but I'm just saying, like, it's very interesting. It's like you can try and hide as much as you can, but you always make mistakes along the way. You will leave things behind. Maybe it's intentional. I don't know. But there's many images that they couldn't change in time. We're picking up all these facts. This is not me making anything up. I went to the museum myself and I saw these things. So who's a black Hebrew Israelite cult, or who's a racist? I'm not making up nothing. I'm not claiming no racist statements. I'm clearly telling you, based on the historical evidence, based on the scientific evidence, these Israelites, these Shemites look like me, look like Negroes. Anyway, let's continue. Here's the image of Chaldeans. Guess when this is? 2nd century. And guess who made it? Greeks. So these aren't even, this is what I don't understand, right? These aren't even them themselves making enemies, people outside, foreigners are making images of these people and making them look like this. They're making them look like this. Just think about that. No one is making up anything here. Yeah, they're telling you what they look like, but no one wants to have a look at this. Everyone ignores, the clear facts that's being presented to us in all over history. So now I'm going to show you a series of images of the Messiah, of Christ, after his death and what he would have looked like. Here's an image of him in 2nd century in the Roman catacombs. By the way, the Roman catacombs, there's many different images in there revealing some hidden truth in there. So I recommend you look at some images from there. But you can see here, Yahushua and his disciples look like Negroes to me. Here's another image of Yahushua in Egypt, painted, I think, by a Coptic Christian, found in 2nd century. It's in the Coptic Museum in Cairo. And here's a clear image of Yahushua with very dark skin, his disciples, and some other disciples with dark skin. I wonder where that came from. Here's an image of a Black Madonna. There's this whole thing about this Black Madonna, and I actually looked into it, and it's very, very bizarre. A lot of Eastern European countries painted Yahushua and his mother black. And I don't mean black, I mean like black. And to me, that sounds like they're trying to tell you something. I mean, you got Russian countries, you've got Turkish countries, Roman countries, Greek. All of these people are saying, yeah, Mary's black, here's an image. Here's Mary's son as well. Mary's son's black. I mean, to ignore all of this, like, it's like you'll be racist. To ignore all of this information I'm presenting you, it would make you racist. Because I'm showing you evidence for what I'm saying. But you can't show me evidence for what you're saying. You can't show me evidence that the Israelites weren't black. You can't show me evidence that Jesus wasn't black. But the evidence is on my side on this case. So if you were to reject this by your own people saying that these guys are black, it would make you racist. Interesting. Here's another image of Black Madonna. Here's another image of Jesus and his disciples. Guess where this was from, guys? Russia. Huh. Another image. Guess where this was from? Spain. Oh, this is recent. Look at this. Pope Francis. Oh my gosh, look at this. Oh, snap. Look at that. Yikes. Ha. Anyway, here's another image. Here's another image. This is from 1st century, 2nd century of the Good Shepherd. Image of Yahushua, clearly depicted, looking Negroid, curly, short, black hair. It's getting repetitive saying this for every image, but it is what it is, isn't it? Evidence shows that that's what it is. So, sorry for boring you saying the same thing over and over again, but I'm trying to drill it into your mind that the Israelites today, or the Jews today, aren't the actual Israelites or aren't the actual Jews. Oh, yikes. Did I just blow your mind there? Let's continue. Let's see if anything else will, prove it to you. So now the question is, how did he become white? Let's have a look. Well, the first place I need to go to is the Renaissance period. And there's a man named Cesar Borgia. And this is from the 15th century, March 11, 1507. He was the son of Pope Alexander VI, was a Spanish-Italian homosexual who resigned his church office to become a military commander, powerful lord, a leading figure in politics of his area. Caesar's religious vocation was never strong, and he gained a reputation at the papal court for his womanizing, lavish clothing, and hunting parties. Caesar was a man of scientific rather than artistic interests, and he briefly employed Leonardo da Vinci as military architect and engineer. A little known fact about Caesar Borgia is that according to the French writer Alexandre Dumas and others, his likeness was used as the model for the long blonde-haired, blue-eyed, effeminate-looking Christ, which Christians the world all over had been bowing down to and worshipping for centuries. His handsome appearance influenced many images of Jesus Christ painted during and subsequent to his career. So, I mean, as I clearly just explained or read through the quotation, this was a planned thing. You know, it was already established, as you can see by the Black Madonna thing, that, you know, they knew what the Israelites looked like even then. But according to the quotation, Pope Alexander and Caesar Borgia, these guys, what they did has affected the world. And even me myself used to have thoughts like this. You know, I used to think, yeah, you know, Jesus olive skinned, you know, yeah, he ain't black, he ain't black. And this is all, you know, programming. It's all, you know, it's a system. They don't want you to look at yourself and, you know, feel any importance. They want you to, you know, it goes back to the Kazaham, you know, you're just nothing. You're just a slave, you're just a beast, you're just this. But the truth is, the same person that's being persecuted and scrutinized is the person that they're trying to be or that they claim to be. And this is why they persecute us, because they can't beat us. And I'm not here to boast about blood or to boast about physique, because I deal with the spirit. But I'm just letting you know that you can't ignore that there's racial wars going on and there's clear hatred going on and jealousy. And it's possibly because what they're jealous of is that we are the children of Israel. And like I said, the salvation is open for anyone who submits the word to the Creator and keeps his commandments and believes in the Messiah. But, you know, you can't ignore that there's these, you know, discriminations going on today. And this is, you know, prophesied. If you look at many books like the Apocrypha, it speaks about them painting the Messiah. When I say them, the Grecians painting the Messiah in their likeness, you know, painting our God in their likeness. So, I mean, this wasn't a coincidence. Pay that in mind. And for anyone who thinks Jesus is white, it would be very incredibly foolish for you to conclude that after this whole presentation I've just done and shown images older than these Renaissance art, you know, of Yahushua painted, you know, looking like a Negroid. So, I mean, if you want to still think he's white, maybe you got problems. But I'm going to go with what his history and proof and evidence is saying, that he was actually a Negroid and he was dark-skinned. There's another video from the Good Times. And they actually do a little segment on Black Jesus, or they do a little episode on it. And they actually took down the video. And they didn't air the video. I wonder why they took down the video. I don't know, man. You tell me. But it's a little joke with it. Basically, the kid comes home with a painting of Black Jesus. And what happens is the mother says, you know, get that out of here. She holds up a painting of white Jesus and says, you know, my grandma's had this all these years. You know, this is what we've grown up with. We grown up with white Jesus. This is what he looks like. He ain't black. And the son was like, okay, got the Bible, pulled up verses in Revelation. You know, it talks about the Son of Man having hair like wool, skin like burnt bronze. And then if you look in Daniel, it also talks about the Ancient of Days, which is also the Son of Man having hair like wool and skin like bronze. So, you know, that whole episode was very interesting, and it's shocking that people are sleeping, like they're not paying attention to any of these things. So I would recommend you check out on YouTube. It's the good, let me say again, it's the Good Times, Black Jesus scene. Have a look at that, and maybe you'll see why Hollywood is trying to stop us from knowing who we really are. So this is the state many Black people are in today, like I've described about the mother who rejected the Black Jesus painting. I'm not saying we make any paintings, because like the Jews did themselves, they didn't make any statues of the Creator. And I agree that we shouldn't do so, also because it could lead to idol worship and many other issues. I think we should worship the Father in spirit. We shouldn't use any images or any, intermediary statues or objects. The only intermediary we have is Yahushua. And he told us that, through him, we can make it to the Father. So we don't need no images or no statues to get to the Father. But I will say this, though. It's very important for us when we're dealing with historical figures to represent them in an accurate way, at least, to be truthful. Because if you represent them in an inaccurate way, it can cause division and it can cause deceitfulness. Because imagine if they depicted King Henry VIII or the predominant known white figures as black, it would be an uproar. But when we see the Egyptians being, depicted as white, and we see Jesus being depicted as white, no one has anything to say about it, or at least the people that say something about it are demonetized, are muted, are shut down. So I mean, that clearly indicates in my mind that this is an agenda, and I'm not refusing to submit myself to this agenda, and I'm simply relying on his history, facts, and evidence to prove my case. And I think many other people in the world are starting to wake up and throw away these lies that they're trying to throw at us, and it makes me glad to see this. So what is in the grand scheme of things? Like I've said, there's a clear agenda to hijack, people of color away from the scriptures and their importance. And I believe this is a plan of the devil. He wants to separate all of God's people through racist wars and race wars. And this is why I took some time, to study and research for myself. So when my brothers and sisters in Christ who are black, watch this, they won't be worried. They won't have any, distaste for the scriptures, because they will automatically tell me, why my book? But no, this is a book for all people. And historically and truthfully, the people that wrote this were black, and deal with it. But don't linger on it, don't make that the forefront of your salvation or the forefront of your mission, because it should be about the Spirit. It should be about your connection with the Creator and keeping his commandments and believing in him. That is more important than the color of your skin. But don't deny the truth. If you deny the truth and say, no, we don't know, oh, he's not black like you, not white like me, all this rhetoric, then you're deceitful, you're a deceiver, you're a liar. And you'd rather stand on the side of truth than stand on the side of lies. So it's up to you whether you want to whether you want to own up and admit you're wrong and come to the truth, or if you want to stay in your lies and worship your white Jesus, worship your statues, or whatever you make of an image of the Creator. That's your choice. But I'm going to tell you this: when you see him come down and descend from the clouds, as it says in Revelation, and he cries with the voice of an archangel, and you see his face, boy, oh boy, you have a shock. You have a shock in store for you. I'll tell you that. When you see his face, But anyway, we'll see until then, won't we? Just to recap, it's clear that the ancient Israelites or Hebrews are black, based on what I've been presented. This is not a salvific issue, as I mentioned. Any person that submits their word to the Creator and believes in Yahushua the HaMashiach will have salvation. This Bible doesn't discriminate skin color or race. I would say so personally. And the Bible was not made by a European or compiled from Greeks or Romans, because you can clearly see the people that the Bible is speaking about are black people. And many of the prophets and many of the disciples that wrote the scripture are being depicted as black people. So that itself tells you who wrote the Bible, or who at least wrote the different books within the Bible. Just like to throw that little image in there. I would probably do a separate hangout on this, just to have like open chat, people come in and talk about it. But yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for watching. I hope you've been blessed. I hope you've been informed. And I hope that you've learned something today, because it's took me a while to come up with. Took me a while to figure it out myself, because I used to be in that position. I used to say, I used to argue with a lot of black Hebrew Israelites about this. I say, how can Jesus be black? Ham means black, and what Hamites? Deal with it. But looking at the evidence, bro, it's peak, man. It's peak for you, man, trying to claim that Jesus wasn't black, because there's just too much evidence. So whatever you think that means for us today as Israelites or as Bantus or whatever you want to call us, That's up to you and your personal journey. But for me, as long as you keep the commandments and believe in the testimony of Yahushua the HaMashiach, you will be saved. And that's all that matters. Rebel against Babylon, submit your will to the Quran, and you will be saved. That's simple. That's all it takes. Brothers and sisters, that are black, stop with this rhetoric about it's a white man religion. Stop with this rhetoric about how we worship a white man and all this garbage. Just stop it. Because if you keep saying it after I've shown you all this, you've got issues. You've got some serious issues because you're denying the truth. You're fighting it internally within yourself because you know the truth. If you profess that these Egyptians were black, and you've got examples of the Israelites being compared to Egyptians, how yet can you still say the Hebrews are white when you know the Egyptians were black? These are all the same people in terms of what they look like, at least. So pay that in mind next time you try and judge an Israelite or judge a Christian or judge a believer and try to bring up this rhetoric, because you need to evaluate yourself and check within yourself if what you're saying is actually true. Like what I had to do, and I came to this realization over a long period of time. It didn't just happen instantly. I had to search because I didn't want to go by just Deuteronomy 28. I wanted to look deeper. I wanted to see if there was any scientific or historical evidence or proof for this. And the truth is, there is. And there's numerous sources that I have missed out. There's numerous images that I've missed out. And for anyone who is still in question, I recommend you search for it. I guarantee if you search for these images, you search for these things, you will come to the same conclusion I have if you are truthful and honest. Other than that, I have nothing else to say. I thank you for paying attention and listening to the hangout and listening to the presentation. I pray that you may all be in good health and that you may sort out your lives, and that you may make it into paradise or into the kingdom. I pray that you may accept truth and not be stiff-necked and not be stubborn. And peace and amen.